Well, hello, boys and girls, and welcome back to Creation Laboratory, where science and the Bible work together to illustrate truths of our marvelous Creator. Well, today we have another simple experiment that will help us understand how God uses the broken. And to assist me today, I have Ruthie. Say hello, Ruthie.
Hi.
Well, why don't you tell everyone what they'll need if they wish to try this experiment at home?
So we got a cup of toothpicks and a glass of water.
Well, thank you, Ruthie. Now let's discuss what it means to be broken. Now, I don't mean being physically broken, like you may have broken your arm while playing football. No, I'm speaking about emotional and spiritual brokenness. Ruthie, why don't you break some of our toothpicks as an illustration? Let's break 5, but be careful to only break them on one side, so that the 2 sides are still connected. And, after each one is broken, group them together so that the broken edges are next to one another, in the center. There are many things that can cause brokenness in our lives. When we experience a great tragedy in life, such as the death of a loved one, it often leaves us broken. Or when we are mistreated by others, we can become broken as well. Sometimes our brokenness comes because of our own sinful decisions. Guilt and shame leave us broken. Now, when we think of something as being broken, we tend to think that it is no longer of any use. But God thinks otherwise. In fact, He finds that those who are broken can be used more easily in His plans. And that is what our experiment will help us to understand, that while we may not see God's plan amidst the trials we endure, He is in fact designing something beautiful. Ruthie, before we continue, it's time to form a hypothesis. What do you think will happen when we put a little bit of water on our broken toothpicks?
I think they might stick together.
Interesting, yes. And what about you, boys and girls? What do you think will happen when we put water on the broken toothpicks? Very well, then. Let us test our hypothesis. Ruthie, please take the eyedropper and place several droplets of water on the center of our broken toothpicks. Wow! Would you look at that? The toothpicks have moved and now have created a star. It seems that the broken pieces were not useless after all. This is a lovely illustration of how God redeems the lives of His broken people. You see, God is always at work, and He is able to use the broken pieces of our lives to create something very beautiful. In 1 Corinthians 1:27 and 28, Paul says, "But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things which are mighty. And the base things of the world and the things which are despised God has chosen, and the things which are not, to bring to nothing the things that are." Paul is explaining that God chooses to use broken people who are willing to obey Him in order to accomplish His will in this world. That way, everyone will know that it is through the power of God, not their own power, that success comes. And often we come to realize that the trials we endured were what prepared us for the work God has for us. Paul speaks of this in Romans chapter 8. In verse 28 he says, "And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose." And in Philippians 1:6 he says, "Being confident of this very thing, that He who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ." In other words, Paul is saying that the trials that often break us will be the first steps in God's great plan for our future when we will see His work completed. Like our experiment here, it is not until afterward that we're able to see what God has had in mind all along. It reminds me of Joseph in the Old Testament. A lot of terrible things happened to Joseph, didn't they, Ruthie? What things happened?
I don't know.
Remember his brothers did something very mean to him?
Yeah.
What did they do? They threw him in a big hole, remember? And then they sold him off into slavery. But God used those things in Joseph's life to bring salvation to his family from the famine. Joseph didn't see it at first, but he recognized God's beautiful plan afterward. He says in Genesis 50:20, when he speaks to his brothers who had sold him into slavery, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive." And of course, Jesus died on the cross. But God turned that into something beautiful too, didn't he? Because Jesus was raised to life, we can now be saved as a result of his sacrifice. Well, Ruthie, were we correct in our hypothesis?
No.
No, we weren't. And what conclusion can we make from our experiment? Trust in God even through the trials and brokenness we endure, because God is still at work, and he can use those difficulties to create something beautiful in the end. If you try this experiment at home, be sure to record your work and tag it on Instagram at CCGS Kids. I would love to see how you did. Ruthie, thank you so much for assisting me today.
You're welcome.
Well, that's all for today. Join us again next time here at Creation Lab. Goodbye!